The easiest way to fund long-term care expenses. You ready? All right. So I just got done watching a video on Morningstar where they're talking about retirement spending and whatnot, and it's about 45-minute long, and I watched about half. I probably watched 3/4 of it. And Christine Benz, I'm a fan of. Some guy who looked like Bill Gates. I don't know who that guy was. The lady from Vanguard, Maria something or other. Blanchett was on there. Kitsis was on there. All the ne'er-do-wells in our industry. And I say that sheepishly. I love those guys. Big fans. Anyway, the frustrating thing, and this is what I think happens in our industry a lot, unfortunately. The researchers will tell you what lay out there, but they don't tell you any strategies other than, well, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this, you could do that to deal with what lay out there, if that makes sense. So I'll give you an example, long-term care. So Christine says when she does her portfolio review things, I guess she does presentations, webinars, or whatnot, when long-term care expenses come up, that always gets hijacked, where people ask all these questions. So obviously that's a big issue for people. And I actually like Maria from Vanguard because I think it was Blanchett pointed out, no, it wasn't Blanchett, it was someone else from Morningstar, pointed out that the average couple will need $250,000 or whatever it was for healthcare costs of retirement, and that does not include long-term care. The same stuff, the stuff we hear all the time from Fidelity. And Maria from Vanguard, I don't know, Bruno, I think, Maria said, which is absolutely correct, well, you don't pay that all in one fell swoop. And the interesting thing is you've been paying that since your adult life anyway, because you've had these things called health insurance premiums you've been paying for. Now, unless you've been having a gold-plated fund where your employer pays the whole thing, this will not be a new expense. And it is piecemeal. You pay it, in pieces. You don't pay $250,000 in one fell swoop. You pay $300 a month, like I talked about with Medicare Part B, Part D, and Medigap. $135 a month for Part B, $35 a month for Part D, $150 for Medigap, and then you add the ancillaries. You need your dental and vision, co-pays, co-insurance, whatnot. That's how you get what your Medicare is. I say about $5,000 a year. I bet if you look at your health insurance per person, by the way, I bet you look at your health insurance and your employer, you're probably paying roughly $5,000 a year, probably for your family. So it does go up a little bit, but it's not something like, oh my gosh, I don't have $250,000. Anyway, so I appreciate that with Maria. But anyway, going back to Christine. So she says the questions are overwhelming when it comes to long-term care. Everyone's scared crapless about it. And of course, not shockingly, because the industry has been so adamant in saying how bad it's going to be. All right, so then Kitsis gets on, and like he does, a good guy, he researches it. He goes, these are the ways you can deal with this. You can buy insurance. You can have a side account, so to speak. You can self-fund. You can do all these things. But the problem with the researchers, they never actually say, maybe this is something you should look at. They just always say these are the things you can do and kind of let you think about it for yourself. And that's fine. Good morning. No, look at those dogs. Not any problem with that, because Kitsis doesn't know who you are or anything, and neither does Christine or any of these guys. My issue, though, is they overlook the inherently obvious thing when it comes to funding long-term care, which is your house. I just don't get why we overlook this. It's the weirdest thing out there. Because Kitsis even said, you have a side account, you can have insurance, you can do this, but you might want to keep your house. And then he just overlooked it. I'm like, but if you go to a long-term care facility, inherently you are not domiciled in your home. They're mutually exclusive. They are mutually exclusive. You cannot live two places, your home and a long-term care facility. If you go to assisted living, you are not in your home. If you go to a nursing home, you're not in your home. If you go to a continuing care retirement community, you are not in your home. You're vacating the premise, so to speak. Thus, the house is being sold. So, it's just weird. It's not just kids, it's all these guys. I just don't get the easiest way to look at long-term care. You have an insurance policy. It's called your home. The equity in your home is your long-term care. Now, what happens is I can hear the naysayers right now. But Josh, what if back in your example, that lady had to have let's see. In your example, you had a husband, wife. We'll just use that for example. Josh and Charlotte, we'll use that. And Josh, what if you needed to go to a facility and Charlotte stayed at home? Well, okay, if that was a reasonable expectation, we could challenge that to some degree or recognize that. It's not very high. How many people are in nursing home facilities? Are men? Not very many. The vast majority are women because their husbands died off. Their husbands died off before they went to a facility. Very rarely did both need to go to a facility. And the example is always the case. Wife takes care of husband dies off, then wife needs care. All right, that's how it works. Not all the time, I grant you. I had a lady who was a teacher in South Carolina, and she had her husband was in a facility. Cost I think $8,000 a month in South Carolina, and she did have long-term care. It paid $6,000 a month, and she stayed home. And ultimately, he died after 18 months, which is the way it always works. Even 18 months, but that was the exception, certainly not the rule, and a rare exception at that. And she could have easily downsized if she needed to. She didn't need to, but she easily could have because she had a much bigger house than what she needed. But she liked her house. They'd been there for many years, raised her kids there, so she didn't want to, but she could have. And long story short, that's the exception. By far and away the rare exception, not the rule. So she didn't need to do that, but she could have. Had another client in South Carolina, because I dealt with, initially was at USAA. I dealt with New York City in the Westchester County and whatnot, going up to Darien, Connecticut, and North Jersey, Morristown. But then when I moved to Atlanta, I dealt with South Carolina and Georgia. That was my client base. So I had another lady in South Carolina. Her husband was, I think, a colonel in the Marine Corps, a Vietnam vet. And I remember them like it was yesterday. And I could see it just declining quickly while in our relationship to the point where he'd call in sometimes and get really upset. And it wasn't his fault. His mind was going. It was just sad. He was getting upset and frustrated because he just couldn't remember. And then the next day he'd call completely oblivious to having called the day before. It would be pleasant as could be. It was sad. Anyway, so we had to talk with her. They needed a durable power of attorney because he had a lot of assets in his retirement accounts that she was not on as a POA. And it was sad because he kind of got accusatory to her, essentially want to go with a pool boy with his money. But it wasn't him. It was a disease. And she knew it. But when he was in a good place, I'd get on the horn with her or him, and we'd contact their attorney just to kind of go over what was going on, have that on a recorded line, so everybody knew what the intention, what we needed to do was going to be. And he was comfortable with that. But then it was tough to get that paperwork signed because he just wasn't there. But anyway, we ultimately did. Long story short, she took care of him. And he was not long for this world. So again, he was going to die in home, and then she would go on and live in the house and probably sell, or if not, maybe sell the home, or not. It doesn't matter. But she didn't have long-term care. But that's the way it works. Now, if she got sick, what happens a lot is they go live with their kids. And when I mean sick, I don't mean like necessarily dementia. Maybe, but I'm more talking about just they can't function as well as they used to be able to. They can't manage the 6 activities of daily lives, bathing, transferring, that kind of stuff. So what will happen is they'll usually move into with kids. Nothing wrong with that, man. I'm telling you. That's the way it used to be. That's the way we're going back to. Nothing inherently wrong with that. But how do they move in with kids? They sell their house. Does that make sense? So you have this house. You have equity in your home. And if you need a facility, once your husband dies, then you'll sell your home. Because you can't live in both places. But I want to leave it to my kids. Well, that's an issue for a second. That's a different kind of discussion. That's called legacy planning. You want to leave a legacy, all right? Well, we need a plan for a legacy, plan now. And you can easily do that with simply buying some life insurance when you're in good shape. Now, remember, I have long-term care insurance, right? Now, I will drop it at some point in the near future, probably five years from now, maybe 10 years from now. The reason for that is because every 3 years now, I get a premium increase, and the premium increase is pretty significant. I think I want to say it costs me about $3,000 a year for Charlotte and me for long-term care. I was talking to a guy yesterday who has, I think he's 58, 59, nice guy. Not a huge asset base, but they have their biggest expense is their long-term care policy. Now they have a gold-plated policy, 5% compounding, unlimited stay in a nursing home. I mean, it's a gold-plated policy. You'll never find those anymore. But man, it's costing him an arm and a leg. Come on, bub. I mean, he's paying, I think he was paying, I want to say $350 a month, and his wife was paying maybe $300 a month or something like that. It was nuts, and it goes up every couple of years, just like mine. And so he's getting swamped. In fact, in his late 50s, it's probably cost him $6,000-7,000 a year, and it's only going to go up more and more and more. And this is the problem with long-term care insurance. What happens is they start raising the premiums every few years, as they can do, and they raise them and they raise them and they raise them. Now you're 70 years old, you've been paying all this money into it, and it's so expensive, but you don't want to let it go because you have the sunk cost into it. And you're like, man, I don't want to let that go. So at that point, it becomes your most expensive item. In fact, the crazy thing is for him right now, his long-term care insurance premiums, and he's nowhere needing it, is more expensive by far than what will be his Medicare. Now, when you factor in Medicare, again, I say $5,000 a year per person. Right out the gate at 65, that's Part B, Part D, Medigap, eyes, ears, the whole thing, teeth. You look at $5,000 a year. So his long-term care, by the time he's 65, will be the equivalent of his Medicare premiums, his health insurance costs. That's freaking crazy. And unlike Medicare, there's no guarantee he's going to need any of that benefit whatsoever. And so we started saying, and his cash flow's tight, man. So I said, look, we got probably we haven't decided this yet, but either reduce the gold-plated benefit that you have, or just drop it outright and save that money in a side account. So I'm thinking, look, if it's costing you $7,000 a year, and you got 6% a year returns on your portfolio, whatever it is, that'd be worth almost $200,000 in 20 years. Now, if you need it, you got $200,000 you can draw on, plus you got your home. If you don't need it, then you got that money to give to your kids anyway. So that's a tough position to be in for long-term care, because A, you don't know if you're going to need it. B, you don't know how much it's going to be in the future. C, the likelihood you need it is quite small. D, you have this other asset called your home that you can spend on. And I just cannot stress enough the idea that you're going to occupy your house and be in a long-term care facility at the same time. Two things are mutually exclusive. They just do not coexist. And secondly, let's just say wife needs to put you in a facility while she's still living in the house. Well, for heaven forbid, just take a reverse mortgage. What's wrong with that? The whole point about retirement planning is to make sure you survive. Again, if we want to make sure our kids get some assets, the easiest, simplest way to do that is to get life insurance. There's no other way around that. If we want to make sure you are secure, then you have to look at all your assets. And one of those assets is your home. You don't get put out. You still got to pay a property tax. But for heaven forbid, if you take a reverse mortgage on that, or you just say, I'm not going to take a reverse mortgage because I want to leave it to my kids, so I'm going to go destitute and I'm going to eat ramen noodles. It just doesn't make sense. But even that doesn't make sense. The idea that your house won't be there. It's going to be there. Now, that assumes you have equity. That's the issue. I assume you got to have equity in your home to be able to use the equity in which to pay for long-term care. 100% of get that, which is why I say pay off your mortgage. That's the one thing you can do. So let's just say you got two choices, long-term care insurance or paying off your mortgage. Now, again, I have long-term care because it's a catastrophe. Oh, there goes a deer. Should I need it? You guys see him, Pablo? See that deer? Look at him. Oh, yeah, you saw it. Oh, there they go. What's up, deer? Pablo's thinking he's going to attack those deer and eat some venison. Pablo, those deers would swamp you and eat you for dinner, buddy. All right, so The issue is I have long-term care because, as my wife, Charlotte, if either of us need to go to a nursing home, we don't have enough equity in the house to sell that, to downsize with 4 kids, with an income loss, and then turn around and fund some of these long-term care needs in a facility, and at the same time have a place to live. We don't. So we offload that with a long-term care policy. But I will get rid of that policy very, very quickly the minute Liam is out of the house, because at that point I'll self-fund either by saving money, I should say, in a side account for long-term care, or by using my home as a place to use to pay for my premiums if Charlotte needs it. Most likely, again, if you look at the evidence, I get sick, Charlotte covers me. She gets sick, she sells the house to go to facility. That's if anything were to happen in that regard, that's what it would be. And that's a big if, because the likelihood of one of those things is happening is quite small. The likelihood both of those things happening is even smaller. But if that were to happen, that is our plan to do that for sure. And again, just look around you. Again, anecdote, you can't use it in favor of your argument, you can't use it against your argument. But it's not anecdotal evidence. If you look into a nursing home and 80% of the people living there are women, that's empirical. You can observe that. And you say, well, what happened to the men? They died before the woman needed to go to nursing home. This isn't rocket science. Now, everyone says, well, my granddad had to go to nursing home. Well, grandma stayed at home. Yep, I get that. Again, that isn't empirical evidence. That's just anecdotal. If you go to nursing home and you see that time and again, then you have empirical. That happens more often than not. And then you have to make assumptions around that. This simply isn't the case, though. All right, so that's the simplest way to cover long-term care, is using your home. You got to define yourself 2 things. We're trying to plan for retirement. What are we trying to accomplish? We want to accomplish the least amount of stress, the most successful probability of having a successful retirement plan. All right. We would also like to plan for a legacy for our children. And then we have to deal with a different thing, or have to come up with a secondary thing to see how we leave assets the most efficient way to the children. If you reduce them by spending them down. But what's the priority? If the priority is for your retirement, not looking at your home, it doesn't make sense. And I wish the researchers would not just use it as a throwaway, but actually say, there is a value added here that can be used, as opposed to spending upwards of $10,000 a year on an insurance policy that most likely, by the way, will never be used. All right, we'll see you.